Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new to my channel, hello, my name is Gabby and welcome. If you've never been here before, never watched any of my videos, have no idea what I do here on my channel, I cover true crime cases, and all the cases that I cover are a little bit older. They're all basically 20 years or older, so if that's something that you might be interested in, maybe go down below, click that subscribe button, and also make sure to turn on the post notifications to be notified every time that I upload. Today's video, we are going to be covering another missing persons case as a part of my No Trace November series here on my channel that I do every single year. But before we get into the case itself, I do have to say that today's video is sponsored, and it is sponsored by MyHeritage. MyHeritage is the #1 family history and DNA service in all of Europe. They make it super fun to map out your family tree, and with their DNA service, you are able to have your ethnicity broken down into percentages. Their service supports 42 ethnicities and 2,114 geographic regions, covering more regions than any other test out there. It's incredibly easy to do. You receive a DNA kit in the mail, do a simple cheek swabbing that takes about 2 minutes, put the swabs into the vials that are provided for you, send them in the mail with an already filled out envelope, and wait for your results, which will take about 4 weeks. Other than an ethnicity breakdown, you are also able to discover new relatives. They are also extremely committed to their privacy policy. They never license or sell genetic data. You are the sole owner of your DNA data. When it comes to my results, I have to say that I was a bit surprised when it came to my Italian side, because I always thought that I was like a little over 40% Italian, and come to find out, I am only 25% Italian. I am mostly Scandinavian, which is Denmark, Sweden, Norway. Very surprising to me. Call me dramatic, a little bit life-changing. But finally finding out my percentages of what I am has definitely become a conversation starter in my family. And also, I really want to start researching into my background. If you yourself want to try out MyHeritage and buy a DNA kit, you can click the link in the description of today's video. You can use the coupon code gabulosis for free shipping. Also, as an added bonus, you can start a 30-day free trial of MyHeritage's best subscription for family history research and enjoy a 50% discount if you decide to continue the service. I also want to mention that there is a holiday season sale going on right now, so make sure to check that out before it ends. I always think that working with MyHeritage is very appropriate for my channel because DNA is just something that we talk about so often here. But thank you, MyHeritage, for sponsoring today's video. With all that being said, let's hop right into the case. This is the unsolved disappearance of Kevin Ayotte. Kevin Jay Ayotte was born on May 12th of the year 1979. He was a sweet little boy with blonde hair and bright blue eyes. He was developmentally disabled. He was hearing impaired, and as a result of that, he had very limited speech skills at the time of his disappearance. He lived with his mother, Joanne, and his 2 older brothers in a cabin in Sugar Bush Township, Minnesota. His parents were divorced, with his father living in Minneapolis, which is located about 230 miles south of Sugar Bush. Before I get into Kevin's disappearance itself, I really want to take a moment to highlight the area in which his family lived at the time of late September of 1982. Sugar Bush Township is an area located in Beltrami County and is about 18 miles east of Bemidji. The township itself is 31.5 square miles, and according to the 1980 US Census, its population at the time was only 121 people. It is an extremely rural area with very few inhabiting it. As you can tell from the map, it is an area consisting of and surrounded by a lot of forest and many bodies of water, 9 lakes to be exact. This would make it even more difficult to find any clues regarding a missing person. There's just so many places to go missing and to dispose of remains, so many places to hide a body if that was your goal. The date in discussion is the very last day of September of 1982. It was later in the day, a little after Kevin's 2 older brothers arrived home from school. Joanne and Kevin, though, had been together all day. One of Kevin's older brothers had taken his bike up the road to a friend's home, but Kevin and his other older brother, Terry, were upstairs in the home. It was about 4:45 p.m. at this time. The 2 older boys had gotten home at about 4:30 p.m. from school. According to Terry, who was 9 at the time, he had been making his bed in his room, and Kevin had been been helping him. After that, Kevin had been in their mother's room playing with some toys. Joanne told a journalist with Transcript Telegram in 1985, "The older boys had just come home from school. I put his little shoe and sock on him that he lost outside, and he followed them into the house. I went around the other side to work on some windows. 3 minutes later, when I went in, he was gone." Of course, we do have to take into consideration that Terry was only 9 at the time, but Terry claimed that when he went to their mother's room to see if Kevin was in there playing with his toys, he wasn't. That he went downstairs and asked his mother where Kevin was. She came inside and the two of them couldn't find him anywhere. Terry stated that his mother then called their cousin, Mike Steele, and Mike came over to help in the search as well. It wasn't only Kevin who was missing from the home. Also, his 6-month-old Springer Spaniel puppy named Flash was as well. Now, Kevin did have a habit of wandering off by himself, but he usually never went very far outside the home. Usually when he went outside by himself to wander around the property, he had a habit of discarding some of his clothing and his diaper. So they started looking around the property, looking for any sign of him, his dog, clothing tossed on the ground, or his diaper just laying somewhere. After finding no trace of little Kevin anywhere, they decided to report him missing, and he was reported missing at about 7 p.m. with the Beltrami County Sheriff's Office. Due to the fact that Kevin was hearing impaired, they knew this search was going to be problematic. If they went out screaming in the forest for this toddler, he wouldn't be able to hear them. But the fact that he disappeared from the home with his dog did give them a little hope that possibly Flash would hear them screaming for Kevin and lead Kevin to be found, or at least start barking and they could follow the dog to where Kevin was. This is, of course, if the dog was still with Kevin. They didn't know. Possibly Kevin and the dog wandered off together and then maybe the dog went elsewhere. They were just hoping that Kevin and his dog Flash were still together. A search began only a few hours after the last time Kevin was seen. Law enforcement was sent out immediately to help search for the little boy and his lost dog in the thick woods, murky bogs, and rocky creeks surrounding the family cabin. Local volunteers helped as well at this time. The initial amount of people helping in the search was roughly 30, but over time, that number grew immensely. Other than the terrain being rough to search, the temperature that night dropped very quickly. It got down to almost 30 degrees in no time. This terrified people involved because there was no way this little boy was going to be able to survive out there with it being that cold and having no coat on, no blanket, nothing with him to keep him very warm. Kevin at the time had only been wearing a checkered shirt, blue jeans, socks, lace-up sneakers, and his disposable diaper. They knew if this little boy had simply wandered off the property with his dog that they needed to work fast to try to find him before morning. Before they knew it though, the sun was rising and they had found no clues of where the boy had gone. An article was released by the Pioneer the next day on October 1st that highlighted the search efforts the night before. Beltrami County Sheriff Tom Tolman was quoted saying, "It's a large, many acres for one small boy to be lost. The odds for a little child are not so good, but at this point, some of our people will be there all night." On Friday, though, there would be over 200 government officials and local volunteers helping. They would even bring in a helicopter to begin an aerial search. They also used a heat sensing device, referred to as a thermoscan device, with this helicopter to scope out the land and see any areas of body heat that may appear between the trees. The search on this day, though, had to pause for a short period of time due to rain and very cold temperatures. It continued soon after clearing up, though. The search went on for days, but they found nothing, and it was heartbreaking at this point for them all because they knew that even if they found him, they would most likely be finding his lifeless body. There was no way that without proper clothing to keep him warm, no food, no water, that this boy would still be alive out there. By a miracle, and I mean a miracle, he would be close to death by the time they would find him. More newspapers began covering the story as well, but they weren't really treating it at this time as a possible abduction case. They believed that this boy had just left his home and walked off, possibly getting hurt or stuck somewhere. It was a couple days after his disappearance, when they scoured acres and acres and acres of land and still came up empty-handed, that people began wondering if possibly it had been an abduction, that maybe someone took Kevin, or maybe he had gotten hurt in some way after wandering off and someone came across his body and disposed of it somewhere because they didn't want fingers pointed at them like they did something. The search teams were made up of a lot of law enforcement, but most of the searchers were locals to the area or were individuals familiar with the area, and they knew where to look. They knew where a small child may end up and how far he could have gotten. They knew directions he was capable of going. So when the search kept going on and not even one thing was found in relation to him, they started to believe that Kevin was not in the area at all, that he may not be in Sugar Bush Township anymore, that someone may have taken him and just left the area. It was days later, and if someone had taken him, they could have been hundreds of miles away by then. When authorities first came to the home, they showed them where Kevin had wandered off before, because he did have a habit of just sneaking past people and wandering away. Based on my research, Terry, Kevin's older brother, stated that Kevin had terrified all of them before when he wandered away from the home and wound up at a bridge about a mile from their cabin. They had searched near this bridge and the path to this bridge at the very beginning of this search, and they found nothing. Now, I know that toddlers are extremely difficult to keep an eye on, but I do question how this child managed to wander off so many times before. It is said that by Saturday, only 2 days after he vanished, that the search party had grown to 500 people. I know that at the start of the search, they didn't want to bring in too many individuals into the search party because they didn't want it to become too confusing and thought they would find the boy soon, not far from the home. But after days had passed, they were desperate and allowed as many people to help as possible. They were even reached out to pretty early on by supposed psychics, but these psychics never got them anywhere. Like I said though, they were desperate. So, even if some random person claiming to have psychic abilities came forward claiming the boy was here or there, authorities did look in those places. By this time, the FBI and the CIA were involved in the case, and they had questioned hundreds of people, even including local sex offenders. It seemed like everyone checked out completely. Well, on October 5th, the Tuesday after his disappearance, Flash showed back up, out of nowhere. The dog randomly emerges from a field across the road from the family's cabin, and this obviously shocks everyone. Flash, though, was completely alone. Kevin was not with him. The dog seemed perfectly fine, except for maybe being a little hungry. Authorities, though, used Flash as a way to help them possibly locate Kevin. They carefully combed the dog's fur for any clues. Nothing of interest showed up, though. They pumped the dog's stomach to see what was inside. The dog had not eaten in days. There was nothing in its stomach except some swamp grass. They decided to put a tracker on the dog and let the dog go to see if it would lead them to where Kevin was. Unfortunately, though, anytime they released the dog in different areas, he just kept returning right back to the family's cabin. Unfortunately, the very first clue they had in this case got them nowhere closer to discovering what happened to Kevin. The main part of the search for Kevin lasted 9 days, and after 9 days of finding nothing, the searching stopped. They had searched across dozens of miles, everywhere they could think of, land and water, in difficult weather conditions half the time, and they couldn't find anything. People around this area really cared for this little boy's disappearance, and people kept an eye out for him in case he had been abducted and someone had him and he was still alive somewhere. Of course, the main individual looked at as a possible suspect was Kevin's biological father. From my research, he did not stay a suspect very long. He was hundreds of miles away, had a very solid alibi, and took a polygraph test willingly and passed it. After that, there was no reason for police to suspect him as having any involvement in his son's case, and no one ever came forward saying that they saw Kevin with his biological father. Time would pass and hundreds of tips would come into the department, but none of them proved to be fruitful. In the year 1984, 2 years after Kevin's disappearance, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was founded, and it began the Missing Children Milk Carton Program, which I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with, where photos of missing children were put on milk cartons around the country to spread the word of their disappearance in the hopes someone would come forward with information. Kevin was featured on some of these milk cartons. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children did a lot for this case. Other than putting his case on cartons of milk around the United States, they also did many age progression photos of him through the years, as a teenager, young man, and a grown man in his 30s, with the last one being done by them of him at the age of 36. In the year 2000, even the IRS began trying to help locate missing children by including missing persons flyers along with tax instruction booklets that were sent out across the United States. Kevin included in this. This, though, is one of those cases that truly had so little updates through the years. One of the main ones that unfortunately got everyone's hopes up for a while was during the year of 2011. Beltrami County investigator Scott Hinners was running names through an investigative database, and something popped up for Kevin. A man in Michigan was using the missing boy's name, date of birth, and social security number. Scott Hinners does a little more digging, and he discovers that Kevin's parents are then living in Michigan as well, in the same region as this man who was using Kevin's identity. Could this actually be Kevin all these years later? Scott Hinners and a special agent from the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension travel to Michigan and work with law enforcement in that area where the man is located. Authorities there were familiar with this man, and they all discovered that this man was not actually Kevin Ayotte, which I don't think surprised them too much, but this man was using Kevin's identity for apparently financial purposes. Yeah, so this man literally stole the identity of a missing child. It was also just a complete coincidence that it happened to be in the same state as where Kevin's parents had relocated to. In the 1985 Transcript Telegram article that I mentioned before, Joanne was quoted saying, "Yes, I believe he's still alive, and I hope and pray that somebody's taking well care of him. I mean, how could he be dead? Whoever did this didn't hurt the dog. Why would they hurt my baby?" Which she does have a point. If Kevin had been abducted and the dog was taken as well, they kept the dog alive. Now, did they keep the dog alive and later drop it off near the home as some sort of a joke? We don't know. The dog, though, hadn't eaten for days and immediately kept wanting to go back to the home when they were trying to track it. So I don't know, but I personally doubt the dog would have just been standing in one place in the woods for days while completely hungry. It seems like the dog's main objective was to get home. If someone had abducted Kevin and his dog, they could have dropped the dog off miles and miles and miles away from the home. You just never know. I have seen so many stories of animals traveling a long distance in a very short amount of time when they are completely determined to get home. But it is quite odd to me that only swamp grass was in the dog's stomach. Don't you think if the dog had been traveling a long distance, it would have ate something else along the way? So it makes you think maybe somebody did drop the dog off not far from the home, and then that's all it really had to eat on its way home. It's just very strange. Now, did Kevin and the dog wander off, get quite far away, something happened to Kevin, and the dog maybe stayed with Kevin a little while and then made its way back home? That is something that a lot of people who look into this case do consider. Did Kevin possibly fall down off of a cliff somewhere, fall and drown in a body of water? Did a large animal get him and the dog ran off? The case now is classified, though, as a non-family abduction, so authorities at this point overall do believe a person was involved. Investigator Joe Klesick of the Beltrami County Sheriff's Office told ABC5 News, "I think about Kevin a lot. I wonder where he's at. I wonder what's happened to him because it's a mystery. It's truly unexplainable to law enforcement what happened to him." He goes on to say, "We want people to know these cases are never forgotten. They're never cold, they're never closed. We've always had an investigator assigned to them. We always will until we find Kevin." When it comes to his mother, it is still obviously so hard for her to talk about. She stated that she walks by his photo every day and wonders what happened to him. Kevin Jay Ayotte went missing from Sugar Bush Township, Minnesota on September 30th, 1982. He had blonde hair and blue eyes. He weighed about 50 pounds, and it states he stood at about 4 feet tall, but I definitely feel like that is a bit tall for a 3-year-old, so I'm not sure his actual height. The day of his disappearance, he was wearing a checkered shirt, blue jeans, lace-up sneakers, and a disposable diaper. He was hearing impaired and speech was limited. He had a cleft chin and a scar on the right side of it. If you have any information regarding Kevin's disappearance, you are urged to contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST, which is 1-800-843-5678, or the Beltrami County Sheriff's Office Missing Persons Unit at 218-333-9111. Remember that you can stay anonymous. So that is the case of Kevin Ayotte. Another case, unfortunately, very fitting for this month's theme. There is really just no trace with this one, and he disappeared in such a remote area that even if he had not been abducted, the chances of finding him after so many days were very, very slim. The area of Sugar Bush Township is still almost the same as it was back then in 1982. As of the 2000 census, its population was a little under 200. If someone came in and took Kevin from his home, it would have had to have been timed so precisely because of his mother and brother being in and around the home and not seeing anyone strange on the property. In my opinion, if he had been abducted, it makes more sense that he wandered off the property and then was taken, and the person eventually just let his dog go. But that is just a personal opinion of mine after looking into the case. If he was taken and kept alive, he was so young when he was taken that the chances of him remembering his life before that are also very slim. If he is out there somewhere, he definitely isn't living under his original name, but I am curious to see what my subscribers have to say regarding this case. Leave those opinions and thoughts down below in the comments, and of course leave some love down in the comments as well for Kevin's loved ones. Thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your day to hear about this case. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, and I will see you all in the next one. We have discussed the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children so many times here on my channel. If you yourself want to donate to them, I will have the link down below in the description of this video.